Hey guys, Ranwell here, and today I'm gonna show you my top 10 Game Boy games. So, let's start. The title obliquely references the fact that this is a proper sequel to and expansion upon the NES Black Box Classic Balloon Fight, specifically Balloon Kid. Takes the engrossing bonus-made Balloon Trip, a sort of proto-endless runner concept set entirely in the air, and turns it into a proper adventure featuring traditional stages, secrets, and bosses. Balloon Kid introduces new play mechanics, including the ability to let go of the balloons that keep heroine Alice aloft to run and jump in traditional platform action style, and in doing so, it introduces a load of surprisingly engrossing strategies to the mix. It's easily one of the finest hidden treasures in the Game Boy library. The two Mario adventures for the Game Boy don't feel nearly so much of a piece as, say, Super Mario Bros. And Super Mario Bros. 3 do. The first Mario Land showed up at bunch and clearly demonstrates Nintendo's developers getting their heads around the capabilities of the Game Boy, while playing it somewhat safe. It features tiny simple sprites and only about half as many stages as Super Mario Bros., all of which tend toward the basic side. On the other hand, it does let Mario take on a few stages in a submarine and biplane. By comparison, its sequel scales up the graphical details, sends Mario through a series of strange worlds unlike any other in the franchise, and gives him weird new powers. What both games have in common is the way they both feel like, well, Mario. Despite their unconventional styles, it took a little while for the devs to get comfortable working within Game Boy's constraints. But in its best moments, the Mario Land duology shows up how uprising and weird Mario can be when Miyamoto isn't watching. The NES to Game Boy conversion. This one's an example of how to do it well and truly right. Capcom comprehensively reworked the source material to fit the reduced scale of the Game Boy, bringing across the classic NES games excellent physics and controls to allow players to swing triumphantly across the tiny screen. Compromise the remake also retools a number of the original levels to edit out the dead-end parts that didn't quite work and ensure the brisker flow through the action. It even adds material including a rousing new final stage that puts players' grappling skills to the test. House big breakout title and the one that cemented its status as the de facto Nintendo second party arrived on the scene in 1992. The hero, a voracious little fellow named Kirby, became an instant fan favorite despite not having been entirely defined in his first outing. In Kirby's Dream Land, our hero is shown as white on the packaging and he doesn't gain new powers by swallowing monsters. Still, Dreamland nailed the up-tempo vibe and overall look that continues to define the franchise's annual installment. That continues to this day. The sequel 1995's Kirby's Dream Land 2 brought the concepts and improvements introduced in Kirby's Adventure on the NES back to the Game Boy before Kirby spun into a variety of handheld block puzzlers and pinball games for the remainder of the platform's life. Approachable, adorable, and possessed of hidden depth, the Kirby series occupies a unique place in Nintendo's character pantheon, and it was established right here. And if you want to watch my review on Kirby's Dream Land 1 and 2, links in the description. Let's go to the number sick. The Final Fantasy Legend trilogy isn't really Final Fantasy, but neither is it too far removed. Designed by Akitoshi Kawazu, I'm butchering that, I'm sorry, Squaresoft's most idiosyncratic blah 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 director legend, and its sequels took some of the unusual concepts that appeared in the unpopular Final Fantasy II for Famicom and run with them set in strange worlds, including physically impossible spaces and lands best beset by banana smuggling cartels. These adventures allow players to build their own teams of distinct races ranging from combat capable of transforming into more or less powerful species by devouring the meat of defeated foes. Weapon break with repeated use, magic casters randomly learn and unlearn spells, and you can use a chainsaw to kill God himself, who in fairness is kind of a jerk here. The Legend series stands out as being the world's first portable RPG series, and its creator took advantage of the fact that they were painting on a fresh canvas to do their own weird thing. Maybe that's why the game still holds up. Nintendo included Tetris with the Game Boy hardware in America, and for good reason. It practically solved the system all on its own, with simple design that cascades into mind-gripping addiction. Tetris works as well for a quick fix of entertainment as it does for a lengthy engagement. Despite its lack of color, Tetris on Game Boy actually ended up being a better game than its NES counterparts. Nintendo and Bulletproof gave it multiplayer link capabilities, brilliant music that showed off the console's packed-in earbuds, and visual design that didn't need color to work. For many people, Game Boy Tetris remains the definitive Tetris experience, despite the fact that there are flashier versions of the game that integrate things like virtual reality and mass-scale competitive multiplayer. The Zelda series has two phases, the rock-solid, the genre-defining adventure phase, and the weird stuff phase. Link's Awakening hovers somewhere in between the two. It makes a lot of interesting changes to the top-down Zelda formula, not least of which is making Link's sword an optional piece of equipment. He can swap it out for the other weapons, a shield that can be used actively as a defensive weapon, and even a magical feather that allows him to jump. This quest also takes place entirely within the bounds of an island, a surreal place yet inhabited by oddball characters and a certain dream logic. Yet the games also set many standards. Link's Awakening was the first Zelda game to feature a complex trading chain subquest and the first in the series to make musical instruments a key element of the quest. But most of all, Link's Awakening combined the feel of the original Zelda for NES with the complexity of and depth of A Link to the Past for Super NES, proving once and for all that the Game Boy was capable of delivering an experience on par with its 16-bit sibling. Technically, you could count this as part of the Super Mario Land series. The first game is properly titled Wario Land Super Mario Land 3, but Mario was nowhere to be found in that game, nor in the sequel, which debuted on the original Game Boy, before resurfacing a year later in color. No, this duology, along with its sequels on Virtual Boy and Game Boy Color and Game Boy Advance, centered entirely on Bad Boy Mario, who debuted as a villain of Super Mario Land 2. By making Wario the lead, the designers at Nintendo R&D1 were free to change up. physicality about him, bashing into enemies and smashing through walls in a way that Mario simply can't, and Wario Land 2 makes the protagonist effectively indestructible, turning his suffering into a gameplay mechanic. All of Nintendo's R&D1's best and weirdest instincts. The dynamics of play from nimble platform as athleticism that didn't necessarily mesh with the Game Boy's tiny resolution to a slower, a more exploration-based design. Wario himself has a more aggressive come true in the Wario Land games, and they created two of the finest Game Boy adventures in the progress. Nearly a decade after the Game Boy's debut, the system enjoyed an unexpected second life thanks to the arrival of Pokemon. Nothing about Pokemon screamed global success on paper. It was a role-playing game and genre that had experienced its first major console success in the US a year earlier thanks to the Final Fantasy VII, which succeeded on the strength of flashy visuals that the humble Game Boy could never hope to equal. Game Freak's game lacked anything resembling a real story, instead following a nameless kid in his quest to capture a bunch of weird monsters. Its battles played out slowly through menus, minimal animations, and cascades of explanatory text, and it was a phenomenon. Pokemon's strength were the same things that initially appeared to be weakness. Its unnamed protagonist. You allowed the player to place themselves in the adventure. All those monsters had to be captured one by one and integrated into the player's combat roster, creating a real connection between player's combat roster and digital creature. But that wasn't the only connection Pokemon created. Even more essential was the real-world's person-to-person connection that allowed two Pokemon trainers to battle and trade their creatures head-to-head through the Game Boy's link cable. It didn't hurt that Pokemon was by a brilliant marketing scheme that included a card game and a television show that's still running to this day. But in the end, it was the deep appealing gameplay that made Pokemon such an incredible showcase for Game Boy. Guys, before we go to our number one pick, here are some honorable mentions that couldn't make the list. Mega Man 5, Final Fantasy Adventure, Gargoyle's Quest, Castlevania 2, Belmont's Revenge, and Molemania. So, play those games, and those are great, but it couldn't get on the list. So, let's go to our number one pick. The greatest Game Boy game was also one of the greatest arcade games of all time, where Game Boy Donkey Kong simply a reissue of a 1991 coin-op title, though it wouldn't be worth making much fuss about. There's so much more to this game than a simple remake. It's a massive reinvention of the old arcade favorite, adding dozens upon dozens of puzzle platform stages that embrace concepts from the entirely of Mario's history. Donkey Kong also serves as a comprehensive embodiment of the Game Boy's sum total existence. It's a look back to Nintendo's own past that simultaneously paved the way for its future. It was here that Mario first learned the chain jumps and handstands that will become a part of his future games. Few years later, the Super Mario 64. It's both a perfect portable game containing 100-bit size standalone levels and a brilliant console title. Thanks to its full embrace of the Super Game Boy peripheral that allowed it to be played on Super NES, and it showed just how far both Nintendo and Game Boy had become in 1994 by expanding greatly on the game that launched the company to heights of fame, while also being vastly more refined and complex than the original Super Mario Land, a masterpiece of a game. So guys, I'm gonna end this here. If you guys love this video, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. Hit that little bell, turn on notifications, and yeah, it's been a long time. Goodbye.